In marketing, everything must work seamlessly, or efficiency, speed, and ROI all suffer. That's why Quad is obsessed with making sure your marketing machine runs smoothly, with less friction and smarter integration. Better marketing is built on Quad. See how better gets done at www.quad.com/build better. Hello, listeners. Today is Wednesday, July 23rd. Welcome to Behind the Numbers, Reimagining Retail, an eMarketer podcast made possible by Quad. This is the show where we talk about how retail collides with every part of our lives. I'm your host for this week, Ariel Fager. Today's episode topic is Amazon Prime Day. But before we get into that, let's meet today's guests. Joining me for today's episode, we have Zach Stambor. Hi, Zach.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great to have you. And we've also got Rachel Wolf. Hey, Rachel.
Hey, Ariel.
Okay, let's jump in. This year, Amazon stretched its July Prime Day event from 2 to 4 days, giving consumers more deals to shop, brands more opportunities to advertise, and Amazon more time to rack up the sales. Despite some reports of a sluggish start, Amazon said it was the biggest Prime Day event ever. So, Zach and Rachel, what's the real story here?
Well, I think, it would have been the biggest Prime Day regardless of what Amazon said, because as you mentioned, it's 4 days versus 2. So that was just sort of inevitable. But I think, there was definitely a disconnect, as you said, in the early hours where you had certain companies reporting a pretty steep decline in sales. But I think if you look at the overall numbers, I mean, Adobe had something like, was it 30.3% growth year on year, $24.1 billion in spending, 2 Black Fridays. I would say that sounds like a pretty resounding success.
Yes, but the Adobe numbers are really interesting, but they point to the broader US e-commerce landscape, not exclusively Amazon.
Yeah.
And so that tells me that this Prime Day period is just a prime time for summer e-commerce, to some extent in-store as well, sales events. Yeah, it seems like Amazon delivered solid results. They said it was the best 4 day period that included a Prime Day in its history. Kind of a weird metric, and one that you would, like to Rachel said, assume they would hit. But it is a little unclear exactly how good it was for Amazon. Amazon is always opaque in its recaps of big sales events. This time around, Amazon was incredibly opaque, and just didn't say that much. That said, I am fairly certain that sales were pretty strong.
Yeah, I think, one data point that I did manage to scrounge out was that Momentum Commerce, which is the company that flagged the decline, they said that they grew sales 4.9% over the course of the 4 days. Again, like Amazon comparing, the 4-day period year on year, which, it is growth. Is it astounding growth? Not really, considering it was twice as long. So I think this sort of tells you about, the results that Amazon saw, which were good, but not necessarily amazing.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit. Kind of talk about maybe tariffs. Did tariffs play a role in this? Did we see kind of consumers shopping differently, stocking up, or putting off any kind of purchases? Or do we think that that didn't really play a role in the results?
I think tariffs are casting a shadow over all of consumer behavior. It impacts how consumers spend, it controls how consumers think about spending, and it weighs on like when they're spending. So one of the things that I think is notable about Prime Day is that at this point it's pretty easy to say that Prime Day has pulled the back to school shopping season forward.
Hmm.
And the back to school shopping period begins now in early July, which is very early. And so that's certainly one way in which tariffs and just this uncertainty is impacting consumer behavior.
Yeah, and I think the other way is just that looking at what people are buying, right? There was some data from Adobe that maybe people were trading up in certain categories, but the vast majority of what Amazon was selling were, these everyday essentials like protein shakes. I think that was a big one. Dawn Platinum dish soap. These are things that people buy regularly, and clearly they're just using these sales, or taking advantage of these sales to buy those everyday products.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Numerator pointed that out, and I thought that's a good point. Why wouldn't you stock up and save a few dollars when you know you're going to buy it? So the sale has always been, to some extent, some of that. And I think this year, consumers leaned in that direction a little bit more than in years past.
Yeah, and I think the longer length of the event also helped with that because people had more time to compare prices, for example, to see whether the dish soap was cheaper at Amazon versus Walmart. And, maybe you put in your cart, but you wait until the last day to actually make that purchase. So I think that also contributed to the shifting behavior over the course of Prime Day.
Yeah, and it makes sense that why, we'd had some headlines at the very start, day one and day two, where things seemed a little slower. Consumers were just kind of waiting to see what kind of deals they were going to get. As Zach mentioned, this isn't just Prime Day anymore. This is a whole bunch of retailers hosting their own competing sales. Um, what stood out to you about other retailer sales this year? How is this Prime Day now longer shaping the broader retail landscape?
So, first of all, everybody has a sale. Dollar General has a sale, REI has a sale, Kohl's has a sale, Best Buy has a sale, and then Walmart and Target, of course, have sales. And I think one of the things that stood out to me this year was that the Walmart and Target sales in particular overlapped quite a bit with the Prime Day sale, in part because Amazon pulled Prime Day so early in July that it was either overlap with the 4th of July or overlap with Prime Day. And so I think that partially explains the Adobe numbers. You saw that pretty strong gain in sales over that 4-day period. The other thing they did was jumpstart the Prime Day sale, often with member exclusive sales to give consumers a little incentive to shop with them rather than wait around to see what Amazon might offer.
Yeah, I think another thing that stood out to me this year is that in years past, most of the attention has been on Amazon and awareness of these competing sales has been limited. But I think that is really starting to shift. I mean, going back to the numerator data, 49% of people who shopped Prime Day also looked at Walmart deals, and 35% looked at Target Circle Week. So there is a lot more awareness and a lot more interest in what these retailers are doing over that period.
And that's just because Prime Day has been around a pretty long time at this point. The earned media from Prime Day is everywhere. And as are articles about the competing sales, like if you look at like Wirecutter or Buy-Sided in the Wall Street Journal, it's all over. And so, yeah, awareness is there, and consumers are shopping around, particularly because they are watching their spending.
Yeah. Thinking about a new 4-day format, what do we think? Is Amazon going to do this again? Is this going to happen for its October Prime Day event? Are we going to see Amazon 4-day Prime Days for kind of the time being?
I think they can't go back now, right? I mean, if the point is to have a record Prime Day every year, you can't make it shorter at this point. That would kind of defeat the purpose.
The other thing I would say is that I think one of the understated reasons to have a longer Prime Day is about ad inventory. Certainly, you want to drive sales, but also you want to serve as many ads as you possibly can. And I think in prior years, they kind of got stuck. They didn't have enough ad inventory to deliver to all of the advertisers who wanted to reach consumers' eyeballs during this marquee moment. And so, what Amazon essentially did was like if Fox could double the length of the Super Bowl and have 8 quarters, I guess they wouldn't be quarters at that point, but like a double the length of the Super Bowl and all of that opportunity to serve consumers advertising, that's what Amazon did. And so, why would Amazon not grab all of that very high margin advertising revenue when it's just low-hanging fruit for them. So I fully expect Amazon to make the big deal days event longer. Will it be 4 days? Will it be 3 days? I don't
Mhm.
know. But I would assume that it will be a longer sales event because why not?
We've seen Amazon really prioritize its advertising business, and its site has probably one of the higher ad loads of a lot of different sites. So, obviously, any chance that it can get to kind of expand that ad inventory, it's going to take. So, I completely agree with you there, Zach.
And the other thing I would add is that consumers are hyper focused on value at this moment in time.
Yeah.
And a sales event that is squarely focused on delivering deals is just a prime opportunity, pun unintended, to drive consumers to spend.
Yeah, thinking about that, again, kind of a forward-looking question, what do we think this tells us about the holidays? I think it's pretty clear we're seeing very value-focused consumers. We're seeing consumers who are waiting out the best deals. What does Prime Day tell us about what to expect for, Q4?
I think it's pretty much as you said, right? I mean, it's going to be Amazon and all these other retailers sort of battling out to see which can have the deepest discounts to get these shoppers in. And I think being early is key. As we saw, as Zach mentioned, Prime Day has been pulling forward back to school spending. Well, if the October sales are pulling forward holiday spending. So I think those are going to be crucial to look at when thinking about the holiday season.
There's also the big unknown here, and that's inflation. Like, what will inflation look like come the holiday season? How will consumers respond to that inflation? The delays in the more extreme version of tariffs has given retailers a buffer to import more items so that they could have them in stock for the holiday season, which is good news for consumers because that means that like you probably won't have items from China that had a 145% tariff.
Hmm.
Great. But the tariffs are still not nothing. The tariffs are still very high compared to any period in any of our lifetimes or our parents' lifetimes for that matter. And to some extent, even like our grandparents' lifetimes, you have to go back to like many, 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 many decades to see anything like this. And so at some point, there will be a point where prices rise. And consumers are already very price sensitive. And so they probably will be pulling back a bit. How much kind of remains to be seen.
Yeah. A question I think I asked you both off pod. Um, do we think that consumers are going to get sailed out? Do we think that a 4-day Amazon Prime Day is too long? Or, as Zach noted, kind of with just the general consumer landscape, is it just enough for people to kind of find the best deals? What do you guys think?
I mean, 4 days is not like 4 months. It's like 4 days is certainly longer than 2 days. It's twice as long, but it's not a week. It's not a month. It's a pretty short period of time that is short enough that it provides a driver to get consumers to spend. So, yeah, I don't think 4 days makes people sailed out. And I also don't think the more specific sales events, the pet sale, the gamer sale, the all of these other sales that Amazon has popped up, you can kind of ignore those sales if you're not in the market for pet food or whatnot. And so I don't think those are in the way. I think people want a sale, people want a deal. And as long as you don't have that dynamic that, like, several years ago, Gap ran into this circumstance where, like, consumers came to expect
Hmm.
everything to be at least 50% off. That's a troubling place to be, but Amazon's not going to get there because it's a totally different type of retailer. And also, the discounts are not that steep. So you don't want to train people to expect a sale, but
Yeah.
I don't think they're at risk of that.
Yeah, and I wonder. I think maybe it's just a question of Amazon sort of refining the 4-day strategy, right? Like if people are reluctant to shop on the first couple days, what tactics can you do? Maybe you take some of those specific days like gaming day or beauty week or like whatever those are and use them to juice sales on those first 2 days. But I think, I don't think shoppers are at risk of getting fatigued, but I think the problem lies more with sellers and whether sellers can sustain this level of discounting plus the advertising spend that is now required for a 4-day Prime Day. And tariffs, all of these things are really weighing pretty heavily on their margins. So I think, there could be pushback from sellers if Amazon decides to continue extending Prime Day and continue extending the length of its sales events.
I
Yeah,
think that's a great
absolutely.
point. And it's one of the reasons why during any of these events, Amazon leans so heavily into its own stuff. All of the gadgets that they sell are heavily discounted because they can do it. They can use these things as a loss leader to get consumers in the door and drive consumers to add to their cart and spend more.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing kind of how this elongated back to school holiday season and how sellers react to it and how they're going to prioritize discounts throughout the entire season. Did either of you shop the sale this year?
I did not. I was very disciplined. And also, I actually forgot about it, which is
How did
surprising.
you? Oh my
I'm
goodness!
not sure how
I,
you do that.
I mean, I was traveling and jet lagged for the,
that's
like the
true.
first
Fair enough.
last 2 days, so I was not in the loop.
Zach, what about
I
you?
for sure bought stuff during it. I got a new running watch, which I have been in the market for quite some time. So that is a big ticket, big-ish ticket item that I made. And then I also did what a whole lot of people did and just stock up on a few things that
Hmm.
I would buy anyway. So dish soap, laundry detergent, those sorts of things. Because why not? If it's a few dollars less and I know I'm going to need it, I might as well.
Yeah,
Did
I'd love
you?
to. No, I
No?
did not. No, I'm not a big online shopper. I'm not a big shopper, period. So I think there's that. But maybe that's not great for hosting a retail podcast. But I did notice that I got a few emails from different other retailers, like bookshop.org. I got an email from, their pre-Prime Day sale. So I did notice other retailers, because I know in past years we've seen, Target and Walmart kind of going pretty hard. But I think this year I've seen a lot more smaller brands and retailers get in the game and try to boost their sales pre-Prime Day. That was an interesting thing to see.
So did you buy from either
Nope,
any of those smaller or
I
other
did not.
retailers?
I haven't bought anything online in, well, a while, a few months, I think. So, unless you count groceries, which I get from Instacart.
Yeah, I didn't buy anything from any other retailers. I was squarely focused on Amazon.
I mean, lucky
I did
them.
look. I comparison shopped.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's, generally a win-win for the consumer, right? If we're having every single retailer rolling out these sales, we get to price comparison shop and see where the best deal is. But I would really love to see, I don't know if there's any way to even get this data. Amazon probably could. What that incrementality, right? Like what is going to having been bought anyway, the dish soap, the laundry detergent, the things that you're kind of always stocking up on, and what are the things that people maybe ordered a little bit more of or different items. I would love to kind of see the overlap between what's kind of a current order and what's a net new sale. But I don't think Amazon wants to tell us. Okay, that's all we have time for today. Thank you, Zach, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Rachel, for being here.
Thanks. I enjoyed our chat.
Yeah. And thank you, listeners, our studio team, including our podcast editors who are always in their prime. Please leave a comment or review and remember to subscribe to Behind the Numbers podcast. We'll be back next Wednesday with another episode of Reimagining Retail. And on Friday, join Marcus for another episode of Behind the Numbers, an eMarketer podcast made possible by Quad.